Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first Bitesize event, which is breakfast with the National Awards judges. Unfortunately, as we're virtual, you've had to get your own breakfast, but the sentiment is there. So I'm really pleased to have you join us. An informal chat, really, with some of our awards judges, just to get an idea of the IOIC awards, what we do, some tips and hints on entering, but also some reflections from the judges of things that they've seen in past entries, which might help to inspire some of the work for this year. I'll ask the panel to introduce themselves in a minute. I'm Justine Stevenson. In my day job, I'm head of internal comms and employee engagement at AQA Examinations Board, but I am in my spare time, in some other time, I am chairman of the awards for IOIC. It's something that I've done for a few years now, and is one of the highlights of the year, seeing award entries and then being able to celebrate with award winners later in the year is one of my favorite things that I do. So really delighted to be able to share some of this with you this morning. So with us we have some of our judges, and we'll go first. Jihan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Jihan, and I am the founder of a startup called Communique, and we specialize in communicating environmental impact, social impact, and governance. In other words, ESG. And it's lovely to be here today.
Thank you. And Kate.
Morning, everybody. I'm Kate Jones. My day job is to look after communications and corporate affairs for Tarmac. In my spare time, I've been delighted to work alongside Justine for a number of years now, both as a Central Region Director for the IOIC. Most recently, I was board chair, and I've been a long-standing awards judge at both national and regional level. So really excited to share some hints and tips and reflections on entries that have stood out for me over that time.
Thank you. And Tim.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name's Tim Rutter. I'm Head of Internal Communications at Tata Steel UK. I hesitate to say what I do in my spare time, because on Twitter last week, someone says, what's the favourite thing about what do you look forward to most on Friday? And I said, going back into the steelworks, which my wife held her head in her hands about. But it is my favourite place to be. So I've been in the steel industry 32 years and in marketing and comms through that. I'm a chartered PR practitioner and winner of the inaugural We Matter at Work IOIC Awards. I've been involved in a number of these things from both sides, entering and judging.
Thank you. Excellent. So some good experience here from our judges to share. Obviously, you probably have questions. We'll have time for some of that at the end. We're not too big a group, so we should be able to just have a chat. But if anything does come up as we're talking that you think of, just stick it in the chat, and we can cover that off as we go. So to start with, I wonder if I could ask and start with Tim. To ask you just a little bit about what it is that makes you want to judge these awards. What do you get out of it? Why is it fun?
As a judge, I hesitate to say part of it is stealing with pride, but they can be quite inspirational. You know, I've been in the manufacturing sector all of my career, so as a judge, seeing examples of communications excellence from other sectors can be really inspiring to see how other people do it. And you know, like I say, to get that sort of holistic view of how other people are doing stuff, and you can take it back into your own industry. But you know, part of it's about giving something back as well. You know, I've been in comms all my life. I've been in, you know, professional institutes for a long time as well. And you know, I think it's important that awards. It was probably only halfway through my career, or maybe even later, that I really clicked about why awards are so important for comms people, comms teams and industries, because it gives you the opportunity to sort of step back and reflect on why you're doing what you're doing, how you're doing it, and actually whether it's a robust process you're going through. And I'm sure we'll come on to that in a bit more detail as we go through. But yeah, it's quite time consuming being a judge, but it's nice to meet peers in the industry. So if anyone's entering this year but then wants to be a judge next year, And they should get on the bandwagon, because we're always looking for judges, aren't we?
Yep.
But it's a really good experience, and you know, like I said, not only seeing examples from other sectors and activities, but also meeting other judges from around the patch.
Brilliant, thank you. And Jihan, anything to add? I mean, you're a bit more of a newer judge for us on our panel, so do you have anything to add to that?
So I've been judging awards for years now, but you're right, with the IOIC, I am the baby at the moment. There are two reasons why I love judging and being involved in judging. The first one is it's my way of giving back to the industry. It's my way of acknowledging the hard work that we're doing as internal communicators by shouting on their behalf, whether they won or not. But I'm always thinking about the people that I'm judging, or the organizations I'm judging. The second one is actually, it's my way of learning. I am a consultant. I've been a consultant for the past 21 years, and I'm a sector agnostic. And my specialty is ESG communications and mainly internal comms as well. So I want to learn, and who are the best people to learn from, who other than my fellow internal communicators, who are showing me the best practices, new ideas, new ways of thinking, and just beautiful acknowledgement of what they're doing. And to me, that really means a lot. And hence, I always make a point to dedicate time to judge.
Excellent. I would, that really resonates with me, particularly that idea, you know, been doing this for quite a long time now, to get that fresh injection of ideas and energy is fantastic. Yeah. And Kate, obviously you're very experienced as a judge. What is it that you enjoy?
I think both those points, you know, giving back and stealing with pride, absolutely. My first reason was that I love to see what other people are doing, because I'm nosy, and they're always inspirational, and there's always ideas that you can take from a different organization or a different sector into your own. The other reason that keeps me coming back is it's so important that we benchmark and measure what we're doing and meet the standards of our profession. And I think awards have got a really big part to play in that, because you do get really good feedback, and you do get to evidence the quality and achievements and results of the work that you're entering. So I think they're a really important part of that professional standard and that benchmarking that we should all be doing.
Thank you. And yeah, I agree. One of the things I think we're very proud of in the IOIC Awards is the feedback that we give, and we'll come on to that a little bit later, but that really does feel then that as experienced communicators, we are able to give a little bit of that, pass a bit of that knowledge on in the feedback that we give by being constructive and what people can look to do better.
Yeah, I would just say, Justine, to add on that feedback piece, because I think it's important. It's one thing getting feedback and reading and thinking, you're caught being overwhelmed by the fact that you may not have won the award and going, yeah, well, whatever. But I would really encourage people, whether they win or lose, to read that feedback critically and going, what can I do with that feedback? If I was going to do it again, what would I do differently? If I was going to enter next year, what would I do differently? Because that feedback has come from experienced comms professionals who kind of know what they're talking about. And if you want to do better in your projects or win an award, then it's really, really worth listening to it and trying to act on it.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. So if we start now to think a little bit about, you know, you might be thinking about entering, you might be thinking about constructing your entries, and looking for some ideas. Obviously, we have a very set criteria. It's very difficult when you're judging things. There's always an element of subjectivity. So we have a criteria which aims to put as much consistency into the process as we can. It will never be completely consistent when you don't have the same person judging every piece of work. But but within the bounds of that framework, it would be great to hear a little bit about what it is that you're looking for when you judge an entry. When you first open that file or look at that page, what are the things that you're looking for? Kate, I wonder if you could kick us off on that.
Yeah, for sure. I guess the first thing I would say, because I'll talk about what I'm looking for in a minute, but I think there's a how to this as well. So I would encourage everybody to bring their craft to their entry. It's a comms exercise in itself. Now, I'm not saying that you have to get your in-house designers or send it out to have it jazzed up. I'm not saying that. You know, a really clear Word document will win just as often as a really swankily designed, you know, professionally put together presentation or InDesign file. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is clarity, and your entry is a comms exercise in itself. We're going to have dozens of entries in some classes, and we do. And you have to work to help us as judges understand what is it you were trying to achieve, how did you go about it, and what were the results. So that's the what of what I'm looking for. It's the measurement, it's the evidence. Where did you start from? What were you looking to achieve, and how did you know when you got there? So the how is clarity and tell me the story, and the what is clear results. That will always make your entry stand out if you can give that evidence.
Such great advice, isn't it? Actually, this is what we do as a living. We take lots of information and complex things and make them simple for people to understand. So employing that in what we're doing in awards is, that's such great advice. Tim, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar. It's not a complex formula, is it? But you know, just to remind people that our, as judges, we're not trying to decide whether we like something or not, right? Because you mentioned the word subjective. You know, we are trying to be objective, not subjective, and especially awards that may have some design aspect to them. You know, we are looking to say, rather than saying, "Oh, I like that, I don't like that," is kind of irrelevant. It's like, does it work for your audience? But you know, as Kate was saying, it comes back to, you know, what is the purpose of this activity? You know, always link it to business goals. What is the issue in the business that you're trying to resolve, whether it's motivation or retention or productivity, or what is the business goal that this activity is? Because we're probably some of the worst in the world. God, this would be fun, wouldn't it? We'll just do a bit of that. And we do a load of comms and it looks good and there's lots of different aspects to it. And you're like, oh, well, I'll win an award. It's like, well, why did you do it? It's like, well, I don't know, really. It seemed like a sensible thing to do. Because, you know, you need to be very objective in saying why we are doing it. What is the purpose of it? And again, Kate said there about, you know, what's the result? And I think it's important for people to remember the difference between input, output, and outcome. You know, as a judge, we're looking for outcomes, not outputs. So he said, oh, we produced 30 newspapers. And it seems a lot and it seems very good, but so what? You know, that doesn't give us any evidence whether anyone read it, they changed their behavior, or, you know, what is the outcome? And it's easy to say here, isn't it, on a sort of fairly informal sort of institute session stuff. That is actually one of the hardest things we are all challenged with. Measure your outcome. It's really hard, really hard. And every time I talk, I reflect on my own industry about some of the good comms I think we've done. And I challenge myself and say, yeah, what was the outcome? I'm like, well, difficult that. And that's really difficult, but it's exactly as Kate said, you know, why are you doing it? What's the outcome?
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things we do find when we're advising people, you know, when they sort of say, oh, I'm not really sure what to enter, or that I've got enough evidence. You know, evidence comes in lots of forms. And I think a lot of people kind of, you know, get a bit stuck on that. Oh, I haven't got any engagement survey results. There's a little bit of me that says, hurrah. But that's you know, really, as Tim has just said, it's the outcome that's important. So be really clear about that. And the evidence for that can come in many forms. And we're not going, you know, it isn't only some kind of metric, numerical metric that we're looking for. Some of that can come in the form of anecdotal evidence, but it has to be properly done. You know, just saying that the CEO told me thanks because he thought it was quite a nice piece of work ain't gonna do it.
You didn't write it for him, did you? You didn't write it for him.
Exactly.
He knew it already.
Yeah. So, you know, that kind of thing isn't going to cut it. But there are other ways of looking for it. And sometimes you're doing some stuff which is really sort of short term, the quick fix categories, things like that as well, actually you're not going to have rafts of evidence from previous years. But if you can't tell us what it was that you were trying to solve and give us an idea of how that worked, then it's going to be very difficult for a judge to actually see the value in what you've done.
And also, don't assume that we know your business. One thing as well that I've noticed when judging is that some people don't tell us the full picture, and they expect us to read between the lines and understand what they're trying to say, which is a shame, because the activities were mind-blowing. I wasn't clear of, what are you trying to say here? What are you trying to achieve? So please give us as much information as you think we need, and that would help us to understand what you're trying to achieve. And my other advice as well is to test the entry. Test it with someone that who's not involved in the communication sector, and say, can you read for me this entry, please? And see, do you understand it? Do you understand what we try to achieve? And then apply. Because believe it or not, the ones who are not in communications are going to be your hardest critics. So they're going to find the gaps that you need to fill for us to get the fuller picture, which will make our life and our judging a lot more objective and faster as well.
Excellent, thank you. I think one of the other things, when what we're looking for is linked to what Jihan said, the sense of personality, because we, as Kate alluded to, sometimes you will have dozens of entrants in one category, and so you are up against the competition in that year. One of the things that makes entries stand out, one of the things that is that makes us kind of connect with it, is a sense of personality. So that, be very clear about what it is that you're trying to do, but show a little bit of you and your organization. And particularly in some of those more creative classes, and particularly in the team classes, we want to, everyone sort of slightly cringes when you say, but we do want to see pictures of the team. We do want to see what your structure is. We do want to see the kinds of people who are working in your team. So I think for me, when I get that kind of sense of who you are, sense of the personality, that's always something which stands out as well. So wherever that's possible, get some of that in.
And as Kate was saying, and Tim, it's not about the aesthetics of how you're presenting it. So to give you an example, when I entered an award, I was the only one in my team, and I was the only female working in that team. I was in construction in Saudi Arabia. So I had no support whatsoever. And against all odds, I actually just wrote the story of how we did what we did, why we did it, and how we measured it. And I designed it myself. And I'm not even a designer. And we won. So don't worry too much about spending too much time on the aesthetic. I mean, don't get me wrong, aesthetics are beautiful, but they're not essential at this moment of time. And to also back up what Justine said, people, tell us the human aspect of it. Don't give us the number of clicks. Don't give us the number of views. Give us the change of behaviors. Tell us how Jihan in one of the sites really took on board the campaign and how she applied it, for example, and how that changed her growth in her career and how that affected the growth of the business. Tell us a full story, and then you'll be fine. You'll be absolutely fine.
Brilliant, thank you. So, I mean, we've started to touch on this a bit, but if you could think of, one sort of piece of advice that you would give people and hopefully some of the people on the call are thinking about it as we start to think about gathering what you might enter and constructing that entry. What's one piece of advice, Kate? What would you say to people in that regard?
The thing that catches me out most often is I'll start reading an entry and it'll be really clear there will be objectives up front. Sometimes they'll be behavioural and outcome. Sometimes they will be, we wanted to achieve this much in terms of output. But what catches me out is when it comes to the measurement section at the end, it bears no resemblance to what they said they were going to do at the start. And that happens more often than you'd credit. It sounds crazy, right? But everyone's laughing. We all see it. Yeah. It just blows my mind that you've set me off really well. I'm thinking, brilliant. There's a really clear objective to this campaign. Yeah. This piece of editorial, this strategy campaign, whatever it might be. And I get to the end and I'm like, well, the stats and the measurement that you've given me there, they're the easy bits, they're the hits, not the habits. They bear no resemblance to what I thought I was going to be judging here. So although we're all laughing, it happens more often than you'd think. So please, measure what you said you were going to achieve, not something that was easy and convenient too. The other thing that catches people out, I think, is don't just write that we haven't measured this, but anecdotal feedback is. Anecdotal feedback has a place, completely it does. But show me how you're going to measure it in a harder way alongside that anecdotal feedback. If it's too soon, tell me what your plan is to measure it and tell me where you're starting from and what you're looking to move. What you're looking to move the dial on. So I think, those short-term pieces of work and the long-term pieces of work are hard to measure. If you're halfway through a campaign and you haven't finished yet, still enter, but tell me where you're heading. So I know I've come back to measurement again, but it really is what makes you stand out. So without it, like you said, Justine, we're going to really struggle to give you some points in that all-important measurement category, and your competition will have given us the measurement. So yeah, you can only win, you can only beat the competition. So don't let yourself down by not giving us anything to go on.
Great advice. Thank you. Tim, what's your top piece of advice?
Yeah, I mean, Kate's hit the nail on the head, really. I always think back to my daughter's just got to university now, and she talks about exams. She's, I've got this big exam, there's not enough time to do all the questions. And I've said, well, remember what they taught you at school is that, it's easy to get the first tranche of each question. So make sure you give each question equal priority, because that's the best way of getting the most marks. And the measurement piece in an award entry is, I would say, almost inevitably the one where people fall short of marks, right? So they put lots and lots of effort in, and they've got very little in the measurement. They go, well, I haven't got anything, so I don't put it in. Find something that will give you some evidence of measure. And Kate's great idea about saying, well, I haven't got it, but I'm planning to do this. Or go and do a focus group, or do something, do something in terms of measurement. Because, the chairman said he liked it. He's not going to get you any marks at all. And if there's 10 marks available for that category, think, well, how can I get 3 or 4 marks, even if I can't get 10? Because it's absolutely worth the effort. And what we tend to do in comms is we do an activity because we think it's the right thing to do, and then at the end we go, oh, you ought to measure it. And then you come back to Kate's other point, which is about saying, it's almost the first thing you say, if we were going to measure this at the end of the campaign, what was it we'd measure? Because then you might go, actually, I'm going to measure it at the start and measure it at the finish and see what the difference is. So that whole measurement piece, I know it sounds like a broken record, but in judging awards for a number of years, it's always the piece that lets people down. A couple of other things in there as well, again, as someone said, I think Jihan said about, we are communicators, right? So there's no room for errors, right? No missed apostrophes, no grammar, no spelling, that is unforgivable, right? In the world of communications, I can't be doing with it. And then that whole bit about getting a peer review is really, really important. Now, I think one of the most important characteristics for a communicator is to be fairly cynical about stuff. You have to be cynical about how your communications will land, so that you can anticipate there's any negative reaction or antipathy or whatever. And I think you need to be equally cynical about your own award entry, or give it to someone who's likely to be critical about it, because that criticism can be the best thing you've got. Because I saw, and we might come on to it a bit shortly, I had an entry once, and I loved it. I read through it, I thought, this is great, fantastic, it was for a campaign, blah, blah. And I was like, right, where's the picture of what it looked like? And it was missing.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to give this thing an award because I think it's great. But there was one part of the puzzle missing. And it was enough to say, well, it doesn't even get a final, because you can't see it. So I know there's a few things in there, but there's no one killer, I don't think, apart from measurement, I would say.
No, it's great. And I think just sort of for information, when we are judging, there are sort of 3 areas that we're looking at really, and we've covered them all off to some degree, but we're looking for the objectives, really clear what you're trying to achieve here. And as Tim said earlier, linked to the business objectives. So, you know, it might have been a fun idea, but if it isn't actually going to help deliver business objectives, it's not going to be as relevant. So we're looking for the objectives. We are also looking for the creativity and the execution. And sometimes that might be, if you're talking about planning in particular, that might be, it might not be flashy, and it might not, you know, it might just be the Word document, and it might be a very clearly set out plan. But if you're talking about things which had an element of design or creative execution, we need to see that to be able to judge that. And sometimes that's difficult, particularly in some of the digital classes, but we do need to be able to see what the execution looked like. And then the last part is measurement. And as we're probably are sounding like broken records, but that's years of experience is telling us that absolutely the area where most people fall down is not being able to explain to us the impact of what they've done and the measurement of that. So those are the 3 areas to really start kind of putting your thoughts to. Jihan, I don't know if you've got anything to add in terms of your sort of like top tips.
Well, the majority has been covered, but I think the one thing that's important for me is that try and avoid what I call campaign vomiting, which means you create a campaign because you have to, because there is, let's say, something that you need to celebrate it, and then you vomit it by launching it, and then you forget about it. To me, that is just not ideal. So when you are presenting your entry, when you're telling us about your campaign, explain to us, how does this relate to the wider and other campaigns? So where does it sit? Personally, I want to know that. As I said, I don't know your business. So this is a PR activity for you to tell me about your business, so I can then go and shout about it later on as well. So I would advise that when you, as I said, tell me exactly what this campaign is. So tell me everything that Tim and Kate has just advised us to do. But in addition, tell me as well, where does it fit in the wider campaign calendar? And why did you choose this campaign specifically? And how does it affect the wider 1-year calendar, if that makes sense?
Thank you. Yeah, that's great advice. We just got a little bit in the chat. Thanks, Tim, for responding to Amy's question about personality and keeping things personal, and some great advice there. This isn't, unless you're in the team category, this isn't necessarily about shouting about the team and reflecting that back on yourselves. It is reflecting how you are benefiting the business. So when we talk about personality, you know, there is something in there around your own team's personality reflected, particularly in those sort of more personal classes. But this is about, you know, the personality of the business and what you're doing. And as we've said earlier, you know, sometimes, and Kate gave this example when we were just chatting before, you know, don't assume that we know about your business because it might be in the media or might be a well-known business. We might know it, but you need to start explaining some of that context and the background against which you're working in the entry that you put together, because that is part of that overall story. You know, we're getting to this the kind of bit around the narrative of what we're doing.
So don't add your company report in there, because that'll just sometimes you get that, you get like 300 words on the session. I need to get past it.
Yeah. And you know, that is, it's a great kind of segue into we've covered quite a lot of this in terms of looking at what positively we do, but just wanted to see what your thoughts are on most common mistakes that people make, and that was sort of reminded me, Tim, at one of the very difficult things as a judge sometimes is when people give you a lot of information. Lots of entries to judge, and obviously compare like for like as much as we can. We give word counts for a reason. So one of the most common mistakes that I find is that people do give a lot of the background information, do spend a lot of that word count on information which isn't actually pertinent to the entry. And we've mentioned it, it's part of our craft, being able to give that narrative in a very succinct, organized way will help us then to be able to do it. But yeah, we do give word counts for a reason. It's quite difficult when we have a lot of information to go through in all of those categories. I don't know, fellow judges, any other thoughts on common mistakes?
I think one of mine would be, don't be afraid to give me the budget. I think there's something around this where people feel if they've got no budget, they'll be penalised. And you have a budget, even if it's just people's time with your in-house team, there's still a budget attached to that. So I noticed that people fear telling me if they've had a decent sized budget. And I'm okay with that if you can demonstrate how it was spent and you can demonstrate how the difference that it made. So I think there's something around, don't be afraid of telling me what this cost you in terms of time or other resource, because that helps me see the difference that it's made and the investment that's been made. But there is something around that there for me, because that is often a gap. And if somebody, again, you can only beat the competition, if somebody in your class has said, this was the investment we made into this activity, whether it be time, whether it be money, and this is the ROI or the result in other way that we saw, they're standing ahead of you because they've given me some extra insight and some extra detail that you didn't. So we don't explicitly ask for it because it does vary across whether it's agency or in-house or any other number of variables. It does vary, but don't be afraid of doing that, I would say, because it's a useful sort of insight and it's another form of measurement.
It's a poison chalice, mind, the budget.
It is.
Exactly as you described, because you know, if you said, oh, we got £100,000 in a top London agency to help with this, I'm going to go, well, I would expect more for that. And
you would expect more for it.
With, two people and a dog, I'm like, that is actually very impressive. And it might be exactly the same piece of work. And it's difficult. It's difficult. If you don't put your budget, you've got no context in which to put it. But if you've spent a lot of money, it's difficult, isn't it? I don't know. I'm used to having that kind of no money, as many of us are. It's really difficult as a judge not to feel jealous of it when people put big money on as well.
We won't penalise you just if you had money we didn't in our organisations, we promise.
But I think, in terms of mistakes people make, Justine, very briefly, it comes back to the previous conversation, which is line it up to the goals, show us the outcome. Right. And give evidence of what you've done, because that's it. That's it. Tell us a nice short story, exactly as you said. We're the people who do this for a living, craft short messages and make it pointed. But tell that story in a powerful, impactful, succinct, demonstrative way, and don't leave anything out.
And if you do have an agency that is helping you to write your entry, make sure that the way it's written, that it is personal and it's not just the agency writing it on your behalf, because the work has been done by you as well. So you deserve as well to be part of that writing or journey or story as well. One thing I've seen last year, last year when I was judging, is that an agency has put in 3 different entries for the same category. But what's interesting is that the activities were exactly the same, which was mind-baffling for me. And I was like, okay, first of all, the agency shouldn't have done this. I mean, I'm a consultancy, so I'm not against consultancies. I'm just against the fact that whoever wrote the brief didn't really look into the details of how different it needs to be from one another. So my advice as a consultancy to you is to make sure that if I am representing you, that you make sure that the way I write for you is exactly how you want it, and it does not replicate with other clients that I am helping, so that you don't lose out.
Yeah, that's great advice. And we do get lots of, there's a big variety in the entries. And so we do get lots of agencies who write on behalf of clients and write alongside clients. We get lots of people who enter entirely by themselves. And that's part of our job as a judge, to be able to look behind what's going on there and to recognize when some of that is makes them look a little bit different. But yeah, don't be put off if you don't have an agency to enter for you,
No.
because yours will be just as good as any that they're doing, if not better.
It will be better, actually. The majority of entries that I have put forward to win were actually written by the team themselves and not by the agencies.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm just mindful of time and that people may well have questions to ask. So I mean, this is a difficult one. We were talking earlier about, we've seen a lot of entries in our time, but we were just discussing whether there were ones in our that we had in our minds that particularly stuck out from over the years. I think, Kate, maybe you might have something.
Yeah, I've got a couple actually, and it kind of goes to the point that we were just discussing. The first one that stood out is quite recent, and it did have a big budget. Unashamedly, it had the kind of budget that made me cry. I would adore such a budget, but they told me what it was. They clearly outlined what they were going to spend it on and why it was the right thing to do. And they demonstrated an ROI, and not everybody can do that. This was a sort of campaign that lent itself to being able to demonstrate ROI in that way. Not everybody can do that. But the investment and it wasn't the budget that made it win. It was the results that made it win. And that brings me to my second point. The other one that really stands out was, it was a number of years ago now, and it was a magazine. I started on the editorial side, and I do love a channels class. I don't tend to enter them anymore because I'm not in that role, and I can't judge them anymore because I've worked with so many of the agencies and companies that tend to enter that I keep myself away. But I love a channels class. And the one that really stood out for me was a magazine. And it went on to win the main award of all the award entries. That just to explain, every class winner at the national awards goes into the kind of award of the night, the Tom Dawson Award, and this publication beat all comers to do that this particular year. And it was written in-house. It was written for a public sector organisation. It didn't have a huge budget. It was the only resource available was the people writing it in the in-house team, which was a small team. And it absolutely showed the success of the organisation through the contribution of the people whose stories were being told in this publication. And it stayed with me. And I can remember writing, it makes me want to work there, and I can think of no higher praise. And I still remember it for that reason. And it had no budget, but it was absolutely stellar. It wasn't even the best designed piece in the world. It was completely done in-house, but its purpose was so clear. Its achievements were well tracked. And I still remember writing, it makes me want to work there. So it's not always the case that it's, to Jihan's point, it won't always be a big agency that wins. It won't always be a big budget that wins. I am more likely, as Jihan has, I have more likely named as class winners, the very basically Word document entry, PowerPoint entry. When it's clear and it's strong and it's showing results, it's going to stand up against anything that any other agency can put in.
Yeah, perfect. Tim, I don't know, do you have any, or are they all blurred into one?
It's really difficult when you can be judging one category and you might have a dozen entrants, and then you've got a number of categories over a number of awards. So it's really difficult to stand out, and it's sometimes easy to be more critical than it is to be praiseworthy. But the one I mentioned earlier about this it was individual campaign category. I can't remember the company, but it was just such a good entry. It had that crucial bit missing, which was the visualization, the visual piece of the campaign. So this is a fantastic campaign, and I couldn't see it. And I remember during the judging day going back to the host company, I think it might have been yourselves, and saying, is there anything missing from this entry? Have you not attached a piece, because clearly it needs some visual and it wasn't there? And I was like, oh, I still want to put it through. And then with conversation with a fellow judge, and she was like, well, how can you put it through? You can't see what it looks like. And I was like, I know, but look at it. It had all the arguments, but it needed that one bit, and I was sad about it. And I felt like sort of getting in touch with the company and saying, you really missed a trick here, because you were in there. Everything else had ticked the box, but
What a shame.
It is such a shame. I have a couple that I remember. One was a magazine, because I love a channels class as well, coming from a similar background. And this entry really stood out for me because they told me what they changed as a result of the feedback, not only from the judges from last year, but also from the feedback that they then sought from the business. We'd given them their feedback, given them some things to sort of, change or to tweak or think about. They'd then gone back to their colleagues and said, what do we need to change? And then in the next year's entry, they showed me what they'd done. And I was just like, that is flipping brilliant.
Yeah.
Well done. Because I absolutely, you've done exactly what I would want and expect you to do.
Nice.
And then another, as a sort of, I hope I don't embarrass you, Tim, but another was from Tata Steel from a couple of years ago, and it was in an imagery class. And it was a striking image, which was great. Always love a great image. But the story that was told around that image, how it was used, what it was designed to do, the emotion that it had in it it kind of hit me right there. And I said, yeah, how could you ever go for anything else? You've exactly told me what you wanted this to do and showed me what it did. And it's just done that to me as well. And I don't work there. I have nothing, I don't know the organization at all, but I was like, I'm invested in this. And it was, it was a clear winner. So those were a couple that really stood out. Okay, just a very quick one, last one, round robin on, do you have a favorite award class? Jihan, we'll go to you first.
Oh, yes, I do. Oh, I do. Oh God. So I have two, and if when I get them, I'm the happiest ever. The first one is the strategic partnership. Love that. Absolutely loved. I'm all about partnership, and especially because I come from a marketing background, we cannot operate alone. So to me, that category is my day done and dusted. The second one is the transformation category, and the change and transformation. That to me, because that's what my specialty is, change and transformation. So I also really enjoy it. And this year, I'm really looking forward to the ESG one as well. Can't wait to see this one. So yes, sorry, I know you said one, but
I said one and you gave me three, and that's brilliant. Thanks. Kate, what about you?
To enter, I love the team class because it's such a good chance for my team who work so hard. I'm going to shout about right now. It's such a good chance for them to reflect on what they've done over that year, to reflect on their contributions, their achievements. And selfishly, we can then demonstrate to my boss and the budget setters the difference that it's made. And that's never unhelpful, right? To be able to have some evidence that says we need more money. So to enter, I love the team class. To judge, I love Game Changer, because you changing your game in your organization is so personal to what your business does and what you're doing as a team, that it can be massive on the world kind of stage, or it can be relatively small but massively impactful for your organization. So I do love Game Changer, and similarly I like the engagement classes because it shows how the IC team has worked across the organization. The engagement classes are a really good opportunity to show how you've worked with HR and with strategy and with any other number of organizations. It's a good way of the IC team showing how integrated it is. But yeah, the team class is my favorite. I don't judge it because I love to enter it, but that's one of my favorites.
Me too. Tim?
I don't know if it's a category in this year's awards, but throughout different institutes awards, My favourite is the low budget category. It might be unsurprising because I work with a low budget, but many people do. And
Yeah.
you know, I've always said you don't need much money in internal comms to have a big effect, right? It's relatively easy. If you've got hundreds of thousands of pounds to go and buy an agency and do loads of stuff and do loads of measurement and do loads of fancy graphics and everything, have an integrated campaign, right? It's actually relatively easy to do.
Yeah.
If you start with nothing, that's really hard to do. But what it does do is it forces your own creativity. It forces the use of your own people's skills and determination and flexibility. It forces you to work with stakeholders on a personal basis and get, you know, people throughout the organization getting involved in your communications. So it forces you to do a lot of things. And surprisingly, you realize how much you can do with very little money. So I love it because I do think it forces out creativity rather than allows us to be lazy and just buy creativity or vehicles or execution or measurement. And I think it shows sort of a healthy state of mind to be able to do that. So yeah, I'd say low budget category every day of the week. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we have a quick fix category, which is kind of in that vein. It's you know, did you spot an opportunity to do something really kind of, you know, quickly? You might not have a lot of extra help to do that, but you spotted it, filled a gap, got a result. Yeah. Great stuff.
I might bid for a new one, which will be something like, you know, unpopular category and unpopular channel category. So, you know, best all user email, right? That I'd be up for that, right? That'd be a great category, wouldn't it?
We'd probably get quite a lot of entries, I have to say.
Or a campaign that didn't work category. I'd like to that I would love to judge that one to see why did it not work.
Yeah. It is interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, obviously the awards are about celebrating success and us feeling good about ourselves, but sometimes you learn more from what goes wrong, and being able to be open about the failure. You
know what, Justine, I genuinely have to admit, I actually do well when I fail because it pushes me. And I learn. Don't get me wrong. I cry, I weep, you know, I curse, but then I pick myself up and just say, you know what, move on. Because if we don't fail, we will never learn. So there is no harm in entering the award as an exercise. And then if you don't win, you have the feedback to tell you why you didn't win. So then, like the one you were talking about, Justine, you go back and you reiterate and reiterate. So don't be afraid of failing when you're entering awards. So what if you fail? No one is going to think less of you.
Yeah.
Can't all win.
No. Excellent. Well, that's the end of our kind of like our formal input. I don't know whether any of you have questions. If you want to just come off mute and ask, we'll happily answer what we can. James, you've come on, you've put your camera on, so I'm waiting. I'm waiting with bated breath for the questions coming.
Yesterday, we're about probably quite a big hit channel. I've turned the camera off previously because we had my garden's looking really untidy. Harold's working from home, so there's a tree blew over. I'm going to rebalancing.
So, well, it's very nice to see you and your garden. James, did you have a question?
I thought I'd turn my camera on just to flag up the fact I am still here and awake. Excellent. It's been really useful. Thank you very much. It was to pick up on a couple of points that were made earlier. You mentioned about anecdotal evidence it can be a good thing. So I was just wondering if there are any more examples of the kind of anecdotal. You talked about the kind of evidence that doesn't cut it, which I'm sure we've all seen. You know, CEO thought it was marvellous. You know, all the stakeholders love it. What will cut it? What are the kind of things that that will make good feedback? I know Gihan gave us a good example, but I just wonder if there's anything else. And in a classic two-part question, are there any other tips to get meaningful measurement and feedback in a relatively short space of time? Because one of the challenges we often have as an agency, I'm from B Troop, sorry, I should have said that at the beginning, is that we are, we're asked, oh, but we want to enter this, but we only did it a couple of months ago, and we've got, as you say, plans for measurement coming up. But are there things that you can do quickly that are effective in a very short space of time that will impress judges?
Sure.
One of mine would be, don't try and do it on your own when it comes to measurement. Go and talk to your HR friends, go and talk to your business analyst friends if you work in-house or for your clients. There are people in your organization that do this measurement stuff all the time. So not just for the entry, but for the campaign, when you set up a campaign, go and talk to them to get their help on how to measure it to start with. Now, you need a time machine to do that in order to do it in your award entry. I fully admit that. But the thing that will always stand out for me is we intended to achieve this, and I don't know, more people are using the expenses system. There are fewer fails on this particular business process, whatever it might be. But I think Justine made a really good point. Go and do a focus group. If you have nothing else, stand up a couple of focus groups, pick up the phone. One of the things that my team does partway through and at the end of change campaigns is we pick up the phone and we ring random people in quarries and random people in factories, and we say, have you heard, what have you heard recently is the first question. And they'll go, I don't know, what should I have heard? And you'll say, okay, well, have you heard anything about so-and-so? And they'll say yes or no. And then you're like, okay, tell us what you remember about it. Yeah. A mystery shopper call, as we call those, that's anecdotal feedback. Yeah. It's organized feedback, but it's anecdotal. And you are checking reach, and you're checking recall, and you're checking understanding, and you're checking if they've done anything. Now, I've got 8,000 people in my organization. I'm not going to ring 10% of them, but I am going to ring a number. And it's just that little nuance of additional measurement that somebody else might not have. And it's taken 10 minutes.
Yeah.
The other thing as well that you could do, James, is that if the client is insisting that they want to enter, fine. Okay, the client gets what the client wants. However, what you could do, in addition to all of the what Kate has said, show us what is the plan. So after you have done this, you've went for a focus group, for example. Yeah, it's not good enough for us, but this is the plan. And this is what we're hoping to get from that plan. Again, take us with you in the journey. Don't leave us hanging there because we don't know anything about you or your client. And that would be sufficient for us to build a full picture.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Thanks, great, cheers.
Yeah, and I think, in terms of good anecdotal, all of that is good. Anecdotal, which is focused on where people demonstrate that they have done something differently as a result of it. No, not just that I liked it. I mean, that's lovely, but that's not really why I did it. So any anecdotal where you can evidence that people have changed or done what you wanted them to do. As Kate said, more people using expense system. One of the things we use as a measure is things like if we're doing an all staff call and we've got Q&A, are we getting more of the questions focused on the actual topic rather than the random, why do I have to come into the office 2 days a week kind of question? Are we moving that conversation to the place where we want it to be? So that kind of thing can be, it's anecdotal, but it is valuable insight.
I would just add briefly, anything that demonstrates some proactivity, rather than saying, oh, the MD sent me an email saying thanks. It's like, I approached the MD, asked him for 10 minutes about this campaign, and he said A, B, and C. I went to the head of the trade union, I went to the key stakeholder B, C, or D, and we had the conversation. So it's not exactly a focus group, but you could do the random, as Kate suggested, of just employees, or you can go to some of the key stakeholders and said, we reached out to them, asked them a set of questions about the impact that they saw. And I think everything demonstrates a proactive approach rather than someone sent me an email saying thanks. It's going to be a lot more powerful, I would say.
Yeah. Great.
And as well, you might also be surprised that after you do all of that and you write all of your case study, and then you present it to your client might actually see the gaps that's missing, and they might actually say, you know what, I don't think we're ready yet.
Yeah. Lisa, who's on a train, so difficult to talk, has asked about entering the same campaign or idea in more than one category, is that an okay thing to do or frowned upon? We have lots of people who enter the same thing into different classes, because elements of it are going to be aimed at different things. And as long as you can demonstrate the specific piece of the objective and the measurement that goes with it, that relates to the different classes or categories, then absolutely it's not frowned upon at all. If you've got excellent work, show why it's excellent across the board and in lots of different ways.
I think I'd just pick up on a point that you were just making there, which is tailor it though. You know, you don't send your CV, you don't send the same CV in for every job that you apply for. Please do tailor it. You know, I will judge 2 or 3 classes every year, and I'm perfectly cool with seeing the same piece of work in both of those, but I don't want to read the same entry because I'm looking for something different. So tailor it would be my advice. But yeah, absolutely, it's not frowned on. A lot of people do. Yeah.
Think of it as Adele.
Excellent.
Adele won what, 3 BAFTA? Was it a BAFTA? No, what was it? What was that?
Brit Award.
Well, thank you. That's the one. She won 3 Brits, not because she was consistent. She did the same in everyone. She tailored it. So think of it that way.
Yeah. We could all be Adele.
Oh no, I know. I would love to be Adele at this moment of time.
Anything else from anyone that would be helpful? I think we may
any fears? Are you afraid of anything? Are you worried about anything that you want us?
Yeah, what stops you? I'd love to hear, you know, straw poll, what stops you entering?
Yeah.
Entry fees, measurement, time, all of the above. Really curious. Chuck some ideas in the chat. We'd love to know.
Yeah, we'd love to know. Okay, so I think probably we have answered everything. I hope you found it useful. Hopefully you can tell we love doing this. I love presiding over the awards, but I love judging them as well. I love working with this wonderful group of people and many other judges, because I think for us what we're really trying to do is to highlight the best of our profession, to improve our profession, to help practitioners be better every day at what they're doing, and that's the aim of what we're doing. So I really hope you are going to enter. We really look forward to seeing those entries and judging them in the various classes. If anything comes to mind and you have got questions, particularly around which category to enter, sometimes there's, you know, should I enter this, should I enter that, then do get in touch with Rebecca, who can either answer, or she will definitely come to one of us and get some advice on what looks best. So don't let that hold you back. Ask the questions and do answer, and do ask, and we will do our best to answer. But thanks for joining us. Thanks fellow judges for taking some time out to do it. It's been great. So
good. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
All right, thanks guys, and
good luck.
Yeah,
good luck.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Bye.